Now, to say that we were, and I've heard some wild theories, like people think that, humanity was seeded by UFOs, and that's I don't agree with that theory. I'm going to address it because
it's a fun one.
It's an interesting theory.
If you found out it was true, would you tell everybody?
I mean, I'd be transparent about it, but I just don't personally believe it.
But would you believe it if you found out that was the information that the government had?
Well, I'd put it out there because that's what I'm
right.
supposed
But
to
what
do.
would that do for your belief system?
That would suck.
But would it suck, really? Maybe that's what's confusing about the Bible. Maybe what's confusing is that it was an oral tradition for hundreds, if not 1,000 years before it was ever written down, right?
Well, I think that it depends on what book you're talking about, right? So,
but I
if you have
mean, the
books written
Old
by
Testament,
prophets.
if you go back to the oldest works of the Bible, weren't most of those stories handed down generation after generation and then eventually written down?
Written into text. Well, some of them are written by prophets, but I mean, Enoch is apparently supposed to predate even the time of Genesis and talk.
The nuttiest one is Ezekiel.
I'm telling you, Enoch is even crazier than Ezekiel.
Oh, I've read. I just don't. Did you find anything about whether or not Enoch is controversial?
You can look up the 4th century.
It was discluded as, I guess, since the 5th century. It wasn't in canon.
5th century.
And why did it get discluded?
It says the Jewish scribes or the priests didn't believe, the rabbis didn't believe it was canon.
Huh.
So it's regarded as scripture.
But what's interesting is that even if that's the case, though, you have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that actually there's Ethiopian Jews, and that's considered the most pure form of the Bible. So, you actually have a division of, the Ethiopian Jewish class that actually recognized Enoch.
How weird is it that some rabbis 500 years ago made a call?
But that's what I'm saying is, you
1,500 years ago,
you can't, though, discredit it. Because
that's kind of weird.
But you can't discredit it because, again, when you have people removing books, I think, look, and I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just saying you should take a look at it.
Oh, here it is. The main reason for the Jewish rejection of the book is that it's inconsistent with the teachings of the Torah. From the standpoint of rabbinic Judaism, the book is considered to be heretical. Another reason for the exclusion of the text might be the textual nature of several early sections of the book that make use of material from the Torah. For example, Enoch is a midrash of Deuteronomy 33. The context, particularly detailed descriptions of fallen angels, would also be reason for rejection from the Hebrew canon at this period, as is illustrated by the comments of Trypho the Jew when debating Justin Martyr on this subject. The utterances of God are holy, but your expositions are mere contrivances, as is plain from what has been explained by you, nay, even blasphemous, for you assert that angels sinned and revolted from God.
So
It seems like some people made a decision that something shouldn't be in there.
Yeah, but that's the thing is it's a disagreement in religion and perspective, but they should have still not removed it. And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James Bible is. We all know that story. He wanted to get remarried. They rewrote it. But you even have the Catholic Bible that has, it's what happened.
Right.
And you have the Catholic Bible that had books that were taken out, and then we have the King James. So I'm not saying that, if you read the King James, you're not getting... you don't have access to God. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there's a bigger picture here that we need to discuss. And I think
there's always a problem when people get involved. And when people get involved in making decisions that this could be real and this could not be. The problem is, all these years later, you're dealing with the repercussions of that. Imagine a world in which if Enoch was left in the Bible and people were like, wait, what happened? Explain the nuttiness of the Book of Enoch to people.
Well, it's okay. So if you read it, it talks about the fall of angels, thus creating really the precursor of civilization that led to the first flood. I think that when you even go into potentially the technology that was given to mankind by these angels, it talks about the hidden beliefs and theories in astronomy, etc., metalworkings, all of it. But it really does explain, you were talking about earlier how you have a lot of these religions around the world that kind of say the same thing. This is kind of the OG text that leads to those stories that we're hearing from many religions around the world. To talk about angels mixing with mankind and then seeding a super essentially race of humans that essentially were responsible for basically damning mankind to the flood. I mean, you hear about stuff in Greek and Roman mythology, people who had these super crazy powers. And you talk about it out loud and it sounds crazy, but that's what the book says. And then the fact that it was taken out and then it's poo-pooed, yet you have one of the oldest religions in the world via the Ethiopians that actually still have it. You have, the Catholic Church that has books that are missing out of the King James Version. I'm just saying that, when you read it, you should read it and decide for yourself. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to what you're saying, but truly give it a chance and see what you have to say. And then, you're going back to this whole concept of if you have this information pertaining to UAPs, whatever they might be, the origins. I mean, if you have a understanding of what Enoch was talking about, kind of makes sense.
Well, I go back to my thoughts on all this stuff. It's like very few people could even read back then. Very few people could write, right? So you're not going to write. You're probably going to try to capture a truth. You're probably not writing necessarily to deceive people and make up a story. So the question is, with all this stuff, is like, what was the original truth that they were trying to write down, and how much of it is getting distorted by translations from ancient Hebrew to Latin to
or
Greek,
Aramaic to English.
Like how much of it?
And there's this thing,
is it possible to even understand what they're saying without understanding the language? My friend Rick Strassman, he's a very fascinating guy, but brilliant guy. One of the things that he did is he taught himself ancient Hebrew so he could read the Bible in ancient Hebrew. It took him 16 years.
Wow.
But he did it because, I want to know it in that language.
That's smart, because there's always an aspect of translation where you lose certain implications.
If you're playing the telephone game, you want to be second. You don't want to be 15th.
Exactly.
Right? And whoever was writing it down the earliest, that's probably you're closer to their depictions of what that truth is than after King James starts fucking around with it and all these
Want
other
a new
people,
wife, got to remove certain stuff.
All these new people start getting involved. But boy, when you go to the really old stuff, the really old stuff is very strange.
I'm telling you, the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, I actually had a staffer that went to Ethiopia. She was on a church trip, and she actually brought me back a copy, and she's like, you can translate it via Google Translation, so kudos to modern day technology. So I have it in my office, and actually when I did my swearing in, I actually did my swearing in on the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible.
Wow.
It's cool. It's direct translation.
That's kind of crazy. It's I would wonder what the impact to all these religions would be if we had definitive proof that we're not alone. Like if there was an introduction, like some sort of an event where they decided, look, this government is too secretive with all this information. You're holding back the understanding of these intelligent life forms, that they are not the apex of this planet, nor are they anywhere close to the peak of the intelligence that's available out there in the universe. Just let me show you real quick. And then what does everybody do now? What happens to the Mormons? What happens?
I think that brings
everybody's gonna fucking blow a gasket.
Well, I think that brings us back to square one. So, by the way, I'm by no means saying that aliens are God. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I think that brings us back to the fundamental question on: do you believe that God exists? Because if you do, then you realize that our freedom, the freedom of choice, is not a man-given right, but a God-given right. And I think that goes back to the fundamental principles of what we believe in true representation. So if you believe that God is real, God is powerful, then it shouldn't be a king or a man that you're looking to, but to God for divine inspiration and to make your life decisions. That's ultimately what freedom of choice is.
But I think even the Catholic Church has acknowledged the idea that if there is intelligent life somewhere else, it doesn't mean that God didn't create it.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's
maybe
interesting
God just didn't tell you about the neighbors.
Well, it does say in Enoch, and then also too, I think in Genesis, that the stars cried out. And so if you're looking, well, a star, if it's not, what do they mean by stars crying out? And then Enoch actually alludes to stars in certain capacities being potentially angels. Now, I'm not saying and this is kind of interesting because, I've had this aspect of my task force, what we've been investigating, but then I have, my personal beliefs and, my religious beliefs. And what I'm telling you is that in my position officially, I've seen men pervert information to get what they want. So it's not unlikely that an entire very secret, very truthful text was omitted in an effort to control population and to insert yourself between individuals' relationship between them directly and God. And I think that,
Well, especially if it doesn't agree with your interpretation
Whatever-
of God. I mean, and this is
Yeah.
what the issue with these rabbis, right?
well, I mean, if you're having people determine any information,
Right.
yes, you should not be able to do that.
Just the same thing as the UFO stuff.
The
There should be
UFO
no
stuff-
one should be the gatekeeper of information.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and hence the transparency on the information.
Especially something that's it should be for all of us. This is nuts.
I think we're probably going to be responsible for the Book of Enoch sales probably increasing on Amazon.
Well, I'm going to buy it. I'm
Good.
going to buy it. I need to read it now. I'm in the middle of the audiobook of the Book of Enoch. And it's one of the wildest things I've ever listened to in my life.
It's weird.
Oh my God, it's so weird. When you realize that a lot of the people in the Book of Enoch are also in the Bible, and that it's one of the craziest stories. It's one of the craziest origin stories ever, that angels came down and bred with humans and made giants.
Right.
The giants destroyed the earth. Like, what is this story?
It's mostly in the Hebrew Bible. It's the story of what led to the flood. Yeah, the sons of Elohim.
What a strange concept that angels came down and bred with humans.
It's a very weird idea. Well, there's different ways to look at translating B'nai Elohim. It might be, well, the first word, B'nai, means the sons of. So it kind of revolves on what's the meaning of Elohim. So it could be God with a big G, could be God with a small g, could be angels, could be dignitaries in a government like judges. Yeah, so the less far out kind of interpretation of that phrase or that term is, the sons of the mighty, the sons of the judges, the sons of the renowned people, as opposed to the sons of angels or the sons of God.
Okay, so how do you interpret the Watchers? What do you think that could be?
I think, they're not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. They are mentioned in the Book of Enoch. That's a crazy book, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I started reading it, and I said to my wife, I can't handle this. It's too much.
It's because if that was left in the Bible, if they decided that was like a part of the canon, that would change everything.
Well, in what way?
It's the craziest story ever. That these things came down and bred with humans and created giants, and the giants destroyed and consumed everything.
Yeah, those giants.
And consumed each other. Like,
yeah, bloodshed.
what kind of kooky story is this? Like, what is this?
Well, it's the reason for the flood.
Right.
Noah and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things just got so bad, God said, I changed my mind. And he brings the flood.
It's like the further you go back, the crazier the story gets.
I know. Well, the Book of Enoch was written maybe 125 BCE. So it's pretty old. But some of the stories that originate, or that the origination of some of the stories in the Hebrew Bible go back, 10,000 years perhaps.
Wow. Wouldn't you have loved to be a fly on the wall 10,000 years ago to go, what were you guys writing down? What really happened?
What really happened? Well, I mean,
it seems like for sure something happened.
What?
Well, whatever the whole Jesus Christ thing was, it seems like that was a real event.
Right, as opposed to the flood.
The flood seems like a real event too. Don't you think the flood was a real event?
What about? Let's see.
I think the flood was the Younger Dryas impact. I think likely, obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, but my inclination is to believe guys like Randall Carlson, because it's a very compelling narrative. Like, what he's saying is, we pass through a comet storm. It happens this particular time every year. And there's been times in history where we've been hit, and it's very likely that this time period, this Younger Dryas impact time period, that could have been the end of whatever civilization existed at the time, and what we are is a rebuilding of it. Mm-hmm. We just kind of forgot about it. And it doesn't make sense that you could forget, like, how they built the pyramids, but they did. Like, it seems like there was really advanced people at one point in time.
Yeah.
Something horrible happened, And then it took a while for people to bounce back. And we're the direct linear progression of the people like from Mesopotamia and Iraq and all that. That's us now. But before that, there was probably something really wild.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the text's description of the generations from Adam to Noah, what civilization was like between the beginning and the time of the end. Yeah, I mean, it became filled with violence. And, God just, said, forget it. Yeah, so that's one way of looking at the younger Dryas, I suppose. This is what it looks like when God changes his mind.
Sure. That also could have been like the Yucatan impact, right? God's like, we can't get anywhere with these fucking dinosaurs everywhere. Just boom.
Yeah.
But he got tired of lizards running the world for he maybe gave it a couple 100 million years. Figure it out, guys. Mm-hmm. And then they have to reset.
Yeah, but what comes after us, I wonder, in 200 million years?
I think it's most likely digital.
Yeah.
I think we're transferring what the idea of what a life form is. What does a life form do? We want to think that it has to be just like us. And I don't think necessarily that's true. I think we might be giving birth to something we didn't anticipate would be a life.
Yeah, a very cool book I try to mention as often as possible is called The First and Last Men by Olaf Stapledon. And he talks about 19 species of man. And this is the first one. It's a story spans 2 billion years. It's this huge story.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's mostly through genetic engineering. Make people bigger, smarter, like brains that occupy a football field. That's one of the species of man. Yeah, so his thought is that it occurs biologically, through genetic manipulation.
Just over time, naturally?
After a while, it gets steered. Yeah, let me think. Yeah, it's all basically based on what people are, what people want. So there's one species that instead of love as kind of the core valued feeling, they have hate as their core valued feeling.
They just can't wait to hate.
Yeah. And that's one of the species that kind of goes through
wow
a period of, rise and then decline, obviously. It just couldn't sustain itself.
Well, you got to wonder, how long this is, if AI really is a thing, it really is a life, we've got to make a compelling argument why AI is bad and we are good.
Yeah.
Because if people say, if you really want to be ethical and moral, this is a horrible take, but if you really want to be ethical and moral, you'd be like, people are uniquely terrible. If we just gave in and became digital life, we could ensure there'd be no more suffering.
How can you know that?
You can't. You can't know a vaccine is safe and effective. You can't.
You just have to try it.
You got to try it
and see what happens.
I think a bunch of people try it. I don't know how much further biological people can go while we're making digital people that are way better than us at basically everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too far away from being a reality.
The way I try to follow it is through a biblical lens.
Really?
Yeah, how does
what chapter are we in right now?
Yeah, well, good question. You read the prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. They just rage against the machine. So I think it goes pretty far back.
Damn.
Yeah, so what's good and bad? What's right and wrong? How do we decide that? That's what I like about the Bible. I mean, obviously, I can make up my own mind about things, but it's nice having that kind of an option, that kind of a tradition to refer to when deciding what's good and bad. What you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be over 600. They're translated as commandments in the Hebrew Bible, and those are what you do to live happily and attain a spiritual state close to God, prophetic, a state of prophecy. Yeah, if it's a certain description of the world and how to interact with it, which is intended to have certain effects and discourage other, decisions. So this is good, this is bad in terms of, this will increase things in your life that are good, and this will decrease them. So it's a very interesting description of cause and effect. That's the way I see those so-called commandments. They're more of a description of how things are run. If you do this, then that'll happen. If you do this, then that'll happen.
Do you think that they were directly given to us by a God, or do you think that this is just the memories of how to keep society together that they have just eventually written down?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Does it come from outside of you or from inside of you?
Right.
Yeah. If it's available inside of you, but hidden away, then prophecy, or really getting it correctly according to the text, would just be an uncovering or a stimulation of what's already inside of you, as opposed to
it's you can achieve some sort of a state.
It's information latent. It could be in the DNA or whatnot, or it comes down from a higher source.
But so like when you're interpreting stories in the Bible, like Moses and the Ten Commandments, how are you imagining this event happening, or are you imagining what were they trying to record? Like what were they trying to remember? Because it seems like by the time they're writing it down, it's quite a bit after the actual event, for the most part, right?
For the most part, yeah.
So what do you think they were? What do you think they were actually describing?
Well, we talked about this briefly last time I was here, if I believed in the reality of the Hebrew Bible. Like, did those things really happen?
Right.
Yeah. And I said, well, it's a really consistent worldview and so on. And I thought about it some more, and I started thinking about it as well. I was starting to think about it as comparable to the DMT state. When you're in the DMT state, it's just there, and it's very consistent, very real. Certain things happen there. And so I think the early version, I think what happened early on in the account of the Hebrew Bible was like the DMT world. It was a parallel level of reality, which was happening. And then slowly it began to you began to segue into this reality. For example, the destruction of the first temple, of the second temple, David's reign, Solomon's reign, the kings after them, the division of the land into, two countries. That is historical. But before that, it was also historical, but it was occurring at a completely different, independent level of reality. Does that make any sense? It's a cool way to look at answering the question, how much of this is real, especially from early on.
I see what you're saying, but it's just, it's always like, it seems like an interpretation of what happened. Like, what were these original events? Like, what was Adam and Eve? What was that? What was the Garden of Eden? There's so many of these stories where I would be fascinated to be there the day the dude wrote it down. Like, what were you guys? What were you talking about for hundreds of years before you wrote this down? Like, tell me what the stories were. How did they go?
Well, my way of dealing with those stories is to just take them at face value. Here's Adam, here's Eve, here's a garden. There's two trees that are, very important. It's beautiful. Yeah, and then there was a serpent spoke to Eve, took the apple, ate it, gave it to Adam. Yeah, and then out of the garden. Well, lots of people in the psychedelic community, anyway, look at the tree of knowledge of good and evil as some indication of God being jealous and didn't want any competition. Didn't want to be like, God did not want man to become like it. And part of that was keeping the two early people away from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not simply the tree of knowledge, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which I think is an important distinction, because once they ate from the tree, they were embarrassed because of their nakedness. And then they hid, thinking they could hide from God, and they didn't believe that before. They kind of went into good versus not good. good versus evil, as opposed to true versus false, which was their original state. So there was before their eating of the apple or whatever the fruit was, they just lived in truth or falsehood. And then after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, then they were embarrassed and tried to hide, made themselves, tree-like coverings coverings from the leaves of large trees. Yeah, so you look at it as if it were happening. There was Adam, then there's Eve, there's the serpent that speaks. And that's the chapters I was looking at very carefully the last month or so, is what happens early on with Adam and Eve. It's a really very straightforward, doesn't take much thinking really to put it together in a way that makes sense.
I think clothes might have been a cheat code for people, not just to escape cold weather, but also to keep from just constantly having sex. Because people are stupid, and they need like some layers of clothes that they have to take off of each other. They can't be just wandering around naked all the time. People would be just like chimps. That would be ridiculous. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So we needed clothes in order to advance as society.
But can't you take off clothes whenever you want?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, but it's like you decide. Like, I don't want to feel that good. I don't want to be out there in the air. I don't want to be brushing up against naked people. We all made that decision a long, long time ago. I think when people became civilized, they realized, like, if we don't cover ourselves up, then people are too gross. They'll just be having sex with each other everywhere.
Yeah.
You got to get things done. We want to keep a society moving.
Right.
Wear some clothes.
Wear clothes. Well, that story could originate, or that that way of looking at things could originate, with Adam and Eve.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It also makes sense, like an intelligent hominid emerging would start to realize that, oh my God, self-awareness, look at my boobs, look at my dick, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Can't believe I'm out here naked. Because it's kind of becoming self-aware as opposed to like a chimpanzee. And as time would go on, it would become more self-aware. And if it happened over a relatively short period of time and it can kind of have memories of the past, that would make sense.
Yeah. Well,
it's got to emerge, right? Like if we came from lower hominids, which everybody kind of agrees, something had to emerge, this understanding of yourself, this thought about what you look like, this thought about what you sound like.
Right. Well, there's two kinds of enlightenment. There's what's called original enlightenment that a child is born with, like a newborn. And then there's enlightenment as an adult, and in between, it's much more fluid. Yeah, two kinds of enlightenment: original enlightenment that infants have and children, and then the enlightenment after you sit in a monastery and get whacked for years.
Right, the kids are born with it. They're born in a psychedelic state. They have no language.
No language, no sense of self.
They just speak with love and touch and need and hold. Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of wild.
Yeah, that's original enlightenment. Just happy or sad or whatever. But
isn't that crazy? You're born perfect.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're born simpler anyway.
Well, yeah. As long as people are taking care of you, it's perfect.
Yeah. Well, the Hebrew word for perfect and for simple are pretty similar. Noah is described as a perfect man, pure, complete. Yeah, so, that's the same word.
That's another good story. Okay. What do you think was going on with that story? Like, what is the origin of the story of Noah and his ark and his family and all the animals on the boat?
Yeah. Well, I think it was taking place in that alternate universe. It may have taken place on the planet. I don't know. I'm, looking at, why we don't have any clear archaeological history story. About what happened during the time of Noah, if there was a time of Noah. It's useful because Noah came from Adam and Eve, and Noah and his family were the only survivors of the flood. The first thing Noah did, got drunk after the flood.
The first thing.
The first thing he did, he planted a vineyard, grapevine, got drunk. He exposed himself in the tent. One of his grandkids reported it and made a laughingstock of him.
Oh, really? Oh, no. Poor Noah. He got canceled? Noah got canceled?
Yeah. Took off his clothes.
Really?
drunk.
Wasn't he like 600 years old too?
He has first child at 600, I think.
That seems
right?
real.
Well, he may have lived six. You know, a lot of people wonder, you know, why did people live, you know, in the Bible anyway?
Right.
How did people live 900 years? Well, they did.
Right. But that's also why people question what the origin of the story is. That's why. Can you hear things like that? You're like, wait a minute, how old was he? 600 years old. Come on, man.
His first
He's
child.
just a regular dude.
Yeah.
His first kid when he was 600.
So when he was 830 or so.
Oh, that seems logical.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Why are you laughing?
Maybe.
Really, it could
Listen,
be true. Why not?
If people lived normally to be 600, would that be any weirder than living to be 100? No. Like, what if something happened? What if something happened and our lifespan just went... brrr?
Yeah. Well, the final species of man lives 35,000 years.
Jeez Louise. That's a long time
Yeah.
to be in a bad relationship. Imagine 35,000 years of getting yelled at.
Well, that would be bad.
I mean, I'm saying 35,000 years would be awesome if you have great friends and your life is together. But can you imagine 35,000 years of fuck this place? That would get tired.
Well, the point that those people tried to attain when they lived 35,000 years was this group telepathy of around the whole planet.
Neuralink.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that was their goal.
The Book of Enoch is nuts. I
That's
talked
the
to myself
Giants
about
one.
it.
That's the Giants
It's
one,
not
right?
just the Giants, it's aliens. It's about the Watchers who came down and mated with human beings. Bro, I'm reading it right now.
I know you are. I
It's
already know.
bananas. She told me to read it. And she's like, you have to read this. It's nuts.
And what did Wes Huff say? Did he said
Yeah, it's 100% of a legitimate text. It's legitimate religious text, but they decided not to include it because it's so nuts and because it goes against what the writings of the Torah.
right?
So, but it was a few rabbis. Just a few rabbis decided.
That nixed
like
it.
if the Book of Enoch was
Yeah.
included in the Bible,
Yeah.
it changes the whole
Why would the
story of the
rabbis
human
decide
race.
what
'Cause
goes
back
into the
then
Christian?
they had that kind of power. They just decided that it doesn't get included in the canon. This is a long time ago.
But yeah, I mean, this is like around. Well, who decided to canonize Bible? Right. This is like Constantine time, right?
Well, that's for the New Testament, right? And so with the Old Testament, you've got Wes Huff would be the guy to
Oh
ask
wait a
all
minute.
these
Enoch
questions.
was included in the Old
Oh,
Testament.
it's old as fuck.
Oh, okay,
Not only is it old as fuck, when they found it, they also found a version of the Book of Isaiah. This is one of the things that Wes Huff told me that was really fascinating. They found a version of the Book of Isaiah that is verbatim the same as the version of Isaiah that was 1,000 years later, which they
Unbelievable.
thought was the
Unbelievable.
original.
Unbelievable.
That's what's crazy.
Unbelievable.
For
To
1,000
maintain that.
years, they maintained the exact same story verbatim, writing it down and passing it on. And the Book of Enoch's in there with that. And the Book of Enoch is bananas.
Yeah, I think we might need to do a little deep dive on the Book of Enoch.
The Book of Enoch, it says that these Watchers came down and mated with human beings and created a race of giants called the Nephilim who consumed and destroyed everything in front of them. Gee, that sounds like people.
yeah.
That sounds a lot like people.
Yeah.
If you got a bunch of little chimps and then you got these tall aliens and they make a fucking 7-foot man, a Viking, who's like chopping off heads and lighting villages on fire and has this unstoppable desire for conquest, that's humans. The Nephilim sounds like humans.
Exactly. So they're not giants. We are the giants. And then what if
They
the other folks?
they might have been giants. Like it's hard to say.
But what if the other folks were the Neanderthals?
Well,
because there was a time where we're living together, right?
Right. Well, they were here before us, allegedly. Well, the question is like, where did humans come from?
Yeah.
This is the real question. There's a really interesting show on PBS right now called Human, where this lady goes on this journey of, it's like, she's, what is her degree in? Is she an anthropologist? I believe she's an anthropologist. But or maybe some sort of biologist, but she goes over the history of the human species. It's very interesting. The migration from across the Bering Land Bridge into North America, when the oldest people started coming here, how they came here. Fascinating stuff. But that's one of those things, like if you think ancient history is filled with horseshit, like ancient human history, like of the humans. That's the woman's name. I don't want to fuck up her name. Ella Al-Shamahi. And it's on BBC and PBS. Really good show. I just started watching it. She's a paleontologist, degree in genetics and taxonomy and biodiversity. But they just found recently a human skull that pushes the date of humans back another 500,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's like all they know is what they find in the fossil record, and there's so little fossil record.
Yeah.
And then they keep finding new things.
Yeah.
Like they just found Denisovans in like 2010. They're like,
What
whoa,
is that?
what's this? Total new branch of the human tree.
It's called
Denisovans.
Denisovans.
Yeah, they
Okay.
found like a bunch of teeth, I think, in Asia, and they're like, what the fuck is this? And then or maybe it was Russia. So there's that. There's the one that they found in China, the big head people.
That's the
That's
one that I saw
real
recently.
recent.
Yeah.
That's real recent. I forget what that one's called. We've done this a million times, but I always forget. But so they're always finding these new versions of humans. So how many of them really were there? But if there's a bunch of science experiments, if aliens are coming down and like, let's try them where they're short and really powerful and they only eat meat. And that's Neanderthals. Like, stop. This one's not
Too
a
much.
good design.
Yeah.
This is not a good design. We need them a little more frail so they invent things.
Yeah.
Because the brutes don't invent anything.
Yeah, more frontal cortex.
Yeah, the Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. That's what's interesting.
So then what part of our brain was specifically different?
See, we have a very our idea of them is that they were dumb and they couldn't talk and that they were brutes. But it doesn't seem like that's true. In fact, it seems like they had art, they definitely had tools, and they had language. And they might have been as smart as us. They were just different. And maybe us being a little weaker is what made us smarter. You know,
Or made us work collectively.
maybe we're a little more alien, just a touch.
Right.
There's a little too much salt in that stew. Let's add a touch more of us. And, you know, it seems like the hairy, 5'7", 200-pound fucking savages with big eyes that might be able to see at night because it looks like they might have had night vision. They have huge eyeballs, man.
Right.
The Neanderthal eye socket's way bigger than ours. Their skull's thicker. Their bones are more dense. They might have had night vision like a dog. You know how dogs, their eyes glow when the headlights hit them? They might have had that same ability.
I mean, I don't know why.
That design's too sketchy.
It's just not
They
working.
can see at night,
Yeah.
and then they go hunting other people. This is too much.
But then we hunted them.
Maybe. We might have just fucked them.
I also heard we fucked them.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
you
we
had that
hunted them and
joke,
we
right?
fucked
You're
them.
like, I got a little bit of... Yeah.
One more time with the monkey.
But in terms of like the stories, like, all right, you know when a comic gets off stage and like they think they killed but they bombed?
Right.
Like there could be people telling those stories in the books.
There could be.
Like meaning what their rendition of what happened
Yes.
is in the book, and that is what they truly believed happened. They might not even be delusional. They are
Right.
delusional, but like that's what they saw, and that's
Right.
what happened to them.
And history is always written by the winners.
Exactly.
Yeah. My version of the Bible story back in the day, I used to have this bit about Noah's Ark. I was like, the problem with the Bible is people are full of shit, and that story sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple. It's
Yeah.
like people lie all the time. I've never met any politician or any person who's in charge of anything that's like really important that I would say never lies. So if you're back then where there's zero accountability, zero video, zero anything, they can't even write.
Well, that's where the cross-referencing makes sense, right? It's like that's when you got a bunch of different people saying the same thing or similar things. You start to go, okay, maybe this did happen.